the real polluters of the earth. The pollution of the earth is not in seas and rivers. No, it is in minds and souls of the men and women of this world. Television brings to us, in open FaceTiming, the most brutal, savage-like, senseless, seductive crimes committed as men act like beasts. Pictures of innocent children kidnapped and forced into lives of sexual slavery and more. And then there are the kitchen table jokes about our national leaders. Jokes about male prostitute and 16-year-old girls. And people laugh and giggle about the known misconduct of major religious leaders as they wonder about the rest. The headlines always stay current when a pastor turns seducer, and the disgrace a national joke. And in spite of all the lights, the glaring vision lights, the flashing psychedelic light, and the powerful floodlights, we seem to be more and more dominated by the prince and power of darkness. And even though we might walk in church brilliance, our spirits are still stumbling in the dark. And whether we want to believe it or not, I want you to know we are living in the dark. You know, there was a time when sin would shock us. But now, what used to amaze us simply amuses us. It will seem we are the new unshockables. We become acclimated to the way and custom of this morally degenerated society. And we accept its arts, its literature, its music, and its language, and we laugh when we should be embarrassed, and attracted when we should be repelled. And it seems we are living in a world where nothing is fixed or sacred anymore. You okay, Brother Haki? Our praise for the condition is seen and reflected in our changing lifestyles and change of vocabulary. Are you hearing me out there? Gambling is no longer gambling, it's sweepstakes. Homosexual is optional lifestyle. And you don't have to be a boy or a girl anymore. You can be whatever you choose to be or call yourself, despite the outcome of your birth papers and what the doctor says you are. And somehow we don't seem to have a word for sin anymore. You know, former Mayor Dinkins passed away a few weeks ago, said there should be no difference in the application of health benefits to people who choose optional lifestyle. What this means is that the same way a man can apply for health benefits for his wife. Two men or two women living in similar relationships can do the same. And nobody should question them. You know, somebody said we have developed a range of alternatives to right and wrong. And instead of saying right and wrong, we say right and stupid. He was not so much wrong as he was just dumb enough to get caught. Instead of right and wrong, we say right and only to be expected. After all, everyone else is doing it. And somehow the voice of conscience has become utterly still. And as a result, we barely see light. And when it appears in shadows. Are you hearing me out there? And we seem, as it were, to be living in a twilight zone of spiritual practice that conforms and compromises our standards. And because we are afraid of offending friends and colleagues, we no longer have the courage to speak our convictions. But that is like living and submitting to the rules and values of the mob. And our spiritual concern is just getting along. I can remember this story told by a goodly gentleman. He said two gentlemen were standing in a room talking when they overheard two men across the room arguing. Are you hearing me? One of the men who were in the argument came over to the two gentlemen and began to express his side of the story. And one of the gentlemen there listening to him said, "Yes, I see, I understand, you are right." And after he said his piece, he walked away. And a few seconds later, the other gentleman who was a part of the argument came over and began to express his side of the argument. And the gentleman who said to the first gentleman who came over, said to this gentleman, "Man, you are right. You know, you are right." So the gentleman standing next to him said, "Wait a minute. How can you say to that gentleman you're right, and to this gentleman you are right?" And he turned to that gentleman and said, "You know something? You are right." And this, my friend, is the state of our society today. Most of us are suffering with "you know you are right" syndrome, trying to get along with everyone. But by that desire to satisfy everyone, we end up satisfying no one. And most of all, God, who should be most satisfied with us. Friends, it is a tragedy to want to live right and be afraid to live right because you don't want to offend anyone. You don't want to be out of step with your friends. You want to be liked, but at what price? What price are you willing to pay for being liked? The fact is that whatever price you pay, everyone still not going to like you. So you are better off. Do the right thing. Speak your conscience and be done with it. Matthew 5 verse 37, Jesus said, let your words be yea and nay. You know, I can recall the conviction that Lillian Etler demonstrated as she was appearing before a congressional committee where they wanted her to state certain things a certain way. And her response was, I will not cut the cloth of my conscience to fit this year's fashion. Friends, I like that. I love it. What she said, I will not cut the cloth of my conscience to fit this year's fashion. The fact is that if you stand by principle, you will not be liked by everyone, but you will avoid the danger of conforming against your conscience. Then, of course, compromise is the next big danger of our time. There used to be a time, you know, and it appears to be a long time ago, when you could get a firm sense of church standards by just watching church folks. By watching what they wore, where they went, and what they did. But now, watching them will only compound your confusion. For we have lost sight of what God's requirements are, and have allowed in the fashions of the world to dictate our lifestyle, and we are confused. No matter how dark things get, we accept it and adjust to it without protest. I can remember some time ago, a group of us get together to have a party, a surprise party for a friend of ours. The date arrived, and at about 8 p.m. that afternoon, we were all in one room, awaiting the arrival of the celebrants, when someone rushed in to announce the celebrant was on his way in. And as soon as the person said that, someone flicked out the lights, leaving us consumed in darkness. But something happened, and the celebrant got held up on the outside, talking to the neighbor. Maxine entered the room from the back door. She was about to turn on the light when somebody said, "Leave the lights off. So and so is just outside the door." When she heard, she sat down next to me, whispering, "It's awfully dark in here." I turned to her and said, "Don't mind the dark. You will get used to it. Just wait and see." Friends, we are not only living in the dark, we are getting used to it. We are becoming comfortable with it. Slowly, but certainly, We are being desensitized to evil, getting used to the dark. And that's not only in society that this is happening, but in our churches and in our homes as well. As it happened to Lot. For Ellen White wrote that even though Lot had gotten out of the dark, his children had gotten used to it. She said the moral corruption in the place was interwoven with the characters of his children. That they were no longer able to distinguish between good and evil, sin and righteousness, right and wrong, light and darkness. And can we claim any difference for our children today? I tell you, friends, we get so used to the dark at times that we think it's bright when it's dark. We move in spiritual fogs and doctrinal twilight zone, and we dare to thank God for the light when we are living in the darkness. And we don't realize how dark it is. How dark it is. But getting used to the dark, my friends, is inevitable. Do you hear me out there? Getting used to the dark is inevitable. Every boy, girl, man, or woman here today will get used to the dark unless you turn on the light. I can remember during the summer, I was sitting at my kitchen table reading. It was a lovely evening, and the table glows bright with the sun coming through the windows. I was so engulfed with what I was reading that I did not notice the sun had sunk behind the horizon. It was only when my wife entered the room and said, "How in the world can you be reading in the dark?" And what do you think my response was? I can see. And as soon as I said that, she flicked on the light. And oh, what a difference the light made. The room lights up, and I begin to see all that I could not see. You see, friends, my eyes had begun to adjust to the dark. Are you with me this evening? Friends, we are not here in this world, in this life, to get used to the darkness. God puts us here to walk in the light. And it's obvious if we are getting used to the dark, something is wrong. And we need to find the light. You know, we have been saying that the church, you and I, are the light of the world. But where is the light? Where do we find the light this evening? The light is found only in Jesus. In John 8 and verse 12, Jesus said, "I am the light of the world. And if you follow me, ye shall not walk in darkness, but shall have light, the light of life." Jesus, my friends, provides the light. And Matthew 5 and verse 14 and 16 said, "You are the light of the world. Let your light shine before men, that they see your good works will glorify God. Jesus, I'm saying, provides us today with light. Now, if Jesus is the light, and he is, if he has provided us with light, and he has, then what in the world are you doing living in the dark? 2 Corinthians 6 and verse 14 asks that same question. Darkness and light cannot exist in the same room, in the same space. But what does it mean to turn on the light? Somebody said, when he thinks of darkness and turning on the light, he's not only thinking about sin of the flesh, for it is that and more. As 1 John 2, verse 9 to 11 declares, that whosoever loves his brother lives in the light, and he who hates his brother lives in darkness. Perhaps the greatest problem with our light is the fact that there is a great scandal in the world about the lack of love of Christians for each other. Ellen White, in the book Desire of Ages, page 370, said that the profession of our faith may proclaim the theory of religion, but it is our practical piety that holds forth the words of faith. Are you hearing me? She said it is the consistent lifestyle, the holy conversation, the unwavering integrity, the active benevolent spirit, and the godly examples that light is conveyed to the world. Friends, if there is darkness, it is because the light is not conveyed. Are you hearing me? Yeah. But the cry of the world is for Christians to turn on the light. Turn on the light through your consistent lifestyle and holy conversations. Turn on the light, young people, through your unswavering integrity. Turn on the light, mothers and you fathers, through your active, benevolent spirit. And through godly examples, I beg of you, turn on the lights. You see, it is easy to turn on the light of proclamation when we talk about dark, how dark it is, and how much light is needed. But I say that is not enough this morning. Proclamation is important, but not enough. For even though we need to make it clear where we stand, and very clear about the standards we affirm, we are not going to turn the lights on by our enunciation of the dark. The light will only get turned on by our living by example. Are you hearing me? So while we need to turn on the light in our proclamation, we also need to turn on the light in our practices. Are you hearing me? So many of us are skilled at low light living. We know how to skirt the edges of the dark and live in the twilight zone of gray. And we tend to turn up the lights only in the company of other lights. But I warn you to be careful, for your light might be shining its brightest when you are in the company of others turning up their lights. Are you hearing me? Sabbath morning, bright lights. Saturday night, dim lights. Bright lights that beams when we talk about health reform and country living and some other things, but flickering and low lights when it comes to talk about love for people and compassion and mercy for your fellow men. Friends, dim light and flickering lights are misleading lights. And they are misleading not only to ourselves, but also to our children as well. And who knows, this kind of lighting might just be the reason for some of the rebellion that we are experiencing in our homes today. You see, they do not have the skill, our children do not have the skill and the maneuvering to live in the twilight zone as you have. And whenever they attempt it, they usually end up in total darkness. Church, darkness is the state of many of our young people today. And they are living in the dark. And we are saying we have done our best. We have done our best with them, but they are living in the dark. Proclamation is good and wonderful, but we as a people with the mission of Christ must turn on the light in our personal world. Are you hearing me? Every one of us must turn on the light, not only by what you say and do, but also by what you see. For they are watching you. For I am persuaded today that the only thing that can expel the darkness out there is the light that is found in here. Jesus. And if the light is not in here, it cannot shine out there. And if the church is not providing an experience that puts the light in here, we might need to close it down or find leaders or leadership that will. For God did not put us here to get used to the dark. No, friends, He puts us here to dispel the dark and walk in the light. And every one of us here today are responsible for turning on the light. Yes, friends, we are accountable to God for turning on the light. So let us, by His grace this morning, turn on the lights. As the songwriter says, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Let us without reservation emulate Him today and turn on those lights for Jesus. Amen.